All it takes is one or two bad contracts to really put a team behind the 8 ball when it comes to building out their squad.
Von Miller is getting a 6-year deal for $120 million from the Buffalo Bills.
Because of the salary cap, building an NFL roster is not a simple process. So let's take a look around the current landscape of the NFL and see if we can pick out the 10 worst contracts in the league today. Kirk Cousins, QB, Atlanta Falcons, 4 years, $180 million. Alright, let's kick things off with Kirk Cousins. Now I get it, Atlanta was desperate for a quarterback as it gets. The Desmond Ridder experiment was a nightmare, and they had talented skill position players all over that roster that were simply wasting away. And, to his credit, Cousins has been a reliable starter throughout his career. But giving a 36-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear $100 million guaranteed? I mean, come on, let's be honest. Achilles injuries are notoriously difficult to recover from, especially for older players. And there's no guarantee that Cousins will return to his previous form. So this is a bit of a head-scratcher. What makes this deal even worse, though, is that Atlanta turned around and used a top 10 pick on Michael Penix Jr. So if you're concerned about the future, why make such a massive commitment to Cousins in the first place? I get Atlanta wanting to roll the dice on Cousins in spite of his age and Achilles tear, since they viewed him as a potential stabilizer, a veteran who could bring some much-needed experience to a young offense. But come on, the big picture decision-making is puzzling to say the least. Quinton Nelson, OG, Indianapolis Colts, 4 years, $80 million. There was a time when Quinton Nelson was once considered the best guard in football, but his play has fallen off in recent seasons, and the $80 million extension that he signed in 2022 is starting to look like a bad investment. Obviously, you need to invest heavily in your offensive line, especially Indianapolis, which has a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson that they're trying to keep healthy. But Nelson's deal is ultimately doing the opposite of that now, as he's just not performing at an elite level. Far from it, really. And that's a tough pill to swallow for a team that has plenty of other holes yet to fill. Jamal Dean, CB, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 4 years, $52 million. Tampa Bay had a surprisingly impressive season last year, but their number one cornerback, Jamal Dean, was not at the epicenter of that success. Really, the Bucs' success, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, was in spite of Dean. As a rookie third-round pick, Dean posted an impressive stat line of 21 tackles, 17 passes defended, 2 interceptions, and even forced a fumble in 2019. Last season, well, he was down to 4 defended passes and 0 picks. Not exactly the type of production that you'd want to see out of a guy who was given big money. $52 million over 4 years to be exact. Especially if you expect him to be the top cornerback down in South Florida for the Buccaneers. Yeah, that's going to be a bit of a problem. Dean struggled with both his performance and his health last year, as we saw him miss 5 games and frequently get burned in coverage. First in Week 9 by Texans receiver Nico Collins, then in Week 11 by 49ers wideout Brandon Ayuk. Maybe health was at the root of all his issues last year, and he'll have a resurgence in 2024. But for now, this is quickly shaping up to be one of the worst contracts in the game today. Miles Sanders, RB, Carolina Panthers, 4 years, $25.4 million. $13 million guaranteed. When the Panthers signed Miles Sanders to a 4-year deal worth $25.4 million, eyebrows were raised. In large part because he's a running back, but also because he was a far cry from the Saquon Barkleys and Christian McCaffreys of the world, who tend to get those sort of big deals. I understand that Sanders was coming off a solid season with the Eagles, but still, this was an extremely questionable decision, and all the doubters have been proven correct thus far, as his first year in Carolina was a complete bust. He managed just 432 rushing yards, and it got so bad that he essentially ended up losing his starting job to Chuba Hubbard. The Panthers were so underwhelmed that they actually drafted Jonathan Brooks in the second round, signaling that Sanders might be an expensive backup sooner rather than later, and one that comes with $7.5 million in dead money tied to him. Needless to say, this deal is already looking like a bit of a mistake. DeShaun Watson, QB, Cleveland Browns, 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed. The Browns' decision to give DeShaun Watson the first fully guaranteed contract worth over $200 million is still a masterclass in quarterback desperation. The organization was so deprived of talent in the single most important position in the game that it was willing to overlook more than 24 accusations of sexual misconduct and bet the farm on Watson in the form of a 5-year and $230 million deal. So here we are. 2 seasons in, and Watson's play on the field, when he's actually been on the field, has been nothing short of underwhelming. His QB rating is worse than both Baker Mayfield and Jacoby Brissett, and he seems to lack any of the firepower that once made him one of the most exciting young quarterbacks in the game with Houston. This albatross of a deal has really screwed Cleveland in a big way. They can't even look at restructuring his deal again to create more cap room, as that would only really end up creating even bigger financial headaches in the future. With a cap hit north of $63 million in 2024, Cleveland is stuck with a contract that might go down as one of the worst in NFL history. Von Miller, edge. Buffalo Bills, 6 years, $120 million. When the Buffalo Bills signed Von Miller to a 6-year, $120 million contract, it was clear that they were going all in to try and get over the hump and achieve their Super Bowl aspirations. The Bills front office saw Miller as the missing piece, a Hall of Fame caliber pass rusher who could bring the kind of veteran leadership and game-changing ability that could maybe push the Bills over the top. And in his first season, it seemed like the gamble might actually pay off. Miller notched 8 sacks in 11 games, providing the kind of disruptive presence Buffalo had hoped for. But then, disaster struck. An ACL tear ended his season prematurely, and the effects of that injury have lingered ever since. At this point, it's not hard to view this contract as anything but a misstep. At 35 years old, Miller's best days are clearly behind him, and his performance since returning from injury has been far from what the Bills expected when they handed him that massive contract. The financial implications of this deal are just as troubling, though. You see, Miller's cap hit in 2024 is a hefty $15.1 million, and the dead money tied to his contract make it nearly impossible for the Bills to move on without taking a significant financial hit. Daniel Jones, QB, New York Giants, 4 years, $160 million. The Daniel Jones contract might not be the absolute worst in the NFL, as the Giants at least gave themselves an out after the season, but still, it's definitely up there as one that raises more than a few eyebrows. When the New York Giants decided to hand Jones a 4-year, $160 million deal with nearly $48 million of that in cap space committed to him, it signaled a level of confidence that very few people, fans or in the media, shared. After all, Jones, at best, ranks somewhere around the top 20 quarterbacks in the league. Solid, but hardly elite. More of a game manager than a true franchise quarterback. And after what we saw play out last season when Jones was ultimately replaced by Tommy DeVito, a practice squad call-up during one of the Giants' worst stretches of the season, it's hard not to say that this is one of the worst deals in the game. Think about that for a second. Your $160 million quarterback getting outplayed by an undrafted free agent whose nickname was Tommy Cutlets. Yes, there was an injury involved, but still. Even when Jones was healthy, his play was clearly not up to par. What made this contract even more questionable was the opportunity cost. The Giants have used that money to lock down Saquon Barkley, who has been the heart and soul of their offense. And instead, they ended up losing him to their divisional rival, the Philadelphia Eagles. Heading into this season, the Giants are hoping and praying that Jones can rebound effectively and become the leader that they need, at least in the short term. But there's a lot of potential for this contract to continue to backfire. With the memory of him being showed up by DeVito still fresh, it's hard to shake the feeling that New York might have made a very expensive mistake. Alvin Kamara, RB, New Orleans Saints, 5 years, $75 million. There's no doubt that Alvin Kamara has been a net positive for the Saints since he broke into the league with them out of Tennessee. After all, he was just a third-round pick and ended up turning into a bona fide superstar for the first few seasons of his career. But his contract is now starting to look like a bit of a burden. The reality of the NFL is that running backs have a notoriously short shelf life, and Kamara's recent struggles with injuries and declining production are a stark reminder of just that. With injuries piling up and his production declining, the $75 million deal that he signed in 2020 is becoming very hard to justify. The Saints are now in a position where they're paying top dollar for a running back who might be past his prime, and that is never a good place to be in today's NFL. Preston Smith, LB, Green Bay Packers, 4 years, $52 million. Preston Smith has been a reliable player for the Packers, and he hasn't fallen off the cliff yet. But at 31 years old, he's starting to show some signs of decline, and there is concern that he is not going to be able to live up to that hefty price tag. His base may be $5.7 million, but the $5.4 million roster bonus definitely complicates complicates things for the Packers, especially as the veteran linebacker's performance has certainly waned. Smith was reportedly open to restructuring his deal before and can choose to do so again, which, will most certainly help both sides, since Green Bay is in the process of getting younger. But if he doesn't, he may end up finding himself on the chopping block sooner rather than later, because that $52 million contract is a roadblock for a lot of the roster retooling that Green Bay needs to do. Cooper Kupp, WR, Los Angeles Rams, 3 years, $80.1 million. I think that everyone knew when Cooper Kupp signed his deal that there was a good chance that he just did not live up to it. I mean, yeah, he always wants the best receiver in football, but injuries have certainly taken their toll, and the $80.1 million extension that he signed in 2022 was an astronomical price tag for a wide receiver at that time. But the Rams had to pay him the big bucks. After all, they had just won the Super Bowl, and he had been otherworldly good all year. Unfortunately, in the time since, he has not been able to recapture that magic, largely because the guy just can't stay healthy. Kupp missed 13 games over the last 2 seasons, and when he has been out there, he looks like he's lost a bit of a step. Either way, at this point, he is definitely taking a backseat to Puka Nacua, and he is not living up to his massive $30 million per year contract. But hey, which contract do you think is the single worst in the NFL today? Which player do you think is actually worth the money? And which players do you think we were right on in this list, and who do you think we got wrong? Let us know in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, well, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.